My 5 greatest stories. Number 1.
Hey, Brad, it's great having you on. Thank you for being with us today. As you know, we're after your best stories. Is there anywhere you would like to start?
Good morning. I started to think about it last night. You know, it's hard to narrow down your life and say, give me 5 stories, but
Yeah.
I'll do my best. I'll give you a few. I was 17 years old and just finishing high school. And my tennis wasn't setting the world on fire, but I didn't know that. Didn't get a lot of offers to go to play at school. I got one offer to go to Arizona State. Didn't even go on a visit, anything. So I said, okay, I'll go there. I wanted to go to Cal Berkeley, and the coach wouldn't even let me walk on. He goes, nope, I don't got a spot for you. You can't even walk on. And I even told him, I said, listen, I'm going to come on your team and play number 1. He goes, no, you're not. I'm not even going to let you walk on. So I took a scholarship to Arizona State. And about 3 weeks before I got to school, the guy had given me a scholarship, got fired. And a new coach come on board. I never even heard of him. It wasn't like we had the internet back then or you could find out. And he was an older coach from Irvine. His name was Myron McNamara. So I arrived the first day at Arizona State, and he says in the first meeting, before he says hello, he says that I've brought in 4 players. They're going to take your spot. And I'm like looking at this guy and I'm like, really? You know? And so didn't get off on the right foot. So as you might expect, it didn't work out. So January 2nd, 1980, I'm 18 years old. I land at Foothill Junior College. And a lot of times when you land at a junior college, that's kind of, you know, a step down, or you don't think that you're somewhere where you're going to be going somewhere. But sometimes in life, you land somewhere and you find something and find somebody that you don't expect. And that's the day that I met my coach, Tom Shivington. And he made me feel like I was at Stanford University. He made me feel like I was at the most important place for the moment. When I started Foothill at January 2nd, 1980, I was 5'7", 110 pounds. The first practice, coach is walking by, and, you know, I'm struggling. I'm throwing my racket a little bit. And he says that, you know what? If we just work on that backhand a little bit, I think it's going to help your game a lot. And I kind of looked at him and I was like, okay, you know, because I had always kind of resisted any coaching. And everything he kind of said to me was a little bit subtly. Like a couple days later, if we work on your serve, I think your game could get better. And so miraculously, over a 6-week period, he helped me dramatically with my backhand, my serve. And for some reason, I grew 6 inches in 6 weeks. And every one of these players over the last 10 years that like I could never beat, you know, especially for Southern Cal, a lot of my section, all of a sudden, like, was like magically guys that I would lose to 2-2. I started beating guys 1-1. And that, you know, the greatness of tennis and in sport is you can meet somebody that can have a great impact in your life. You just have to be ready for it. And being able to meet my coach, Tom Shivington, that day, and then he coached me throughout the rest of my career. I like to think sometimes your wife's biggest fear is that you become your dad through osmosis. I'd like to think that I became my coach through osmosis. I just told him that I had the opportunity after I played to coach a little, you know, players that were a little better than he had.
Number 2.
There's a little bit of a carryover to 1994. I'm playing and coaching Andre. I started coaching him in March of 94. And we were in the summer in Washington. And I remember being in the players' lounge with Andre. And I'm looking at the stats. We're both kind of looking at them. And I love stats, but that was like the only time that you would see them. And they had 6 categories of serve and 6 categories of return. So I'm looking at the stats, and all of a sudden I see return stats. Andre is in the top 3 of every statistic. Then I flip over to the serve stats, and I'm looking for his name. And he's not in the top 25 of any serve stat. And I just said to Andre, if you can get in the top 10, let's just say 10, in service games held over the next 12 months, all of your dreams, what you're thinking about, what you want to accomplish in tennis is going to come true. And he's looking at me and he goes, why would I settle for wanting to be 10? He goes, that's shit. And I'm like, well, Andre, you're about number 29 in service games held, break points, save, you're like 52, you break like 3 times a set, you lose your serve like twice a set. And he's like, you would be happy with 10. And I said, yeah, heck yeah, I'd be happy with 10. He goes, that's ridiculous that you would aspire to be 10. And I was like, Andre, if you were 10 with being in the top 3 at every return stat, I don't even have to know anything else. Your ranking is zooming up. And he says, you know what? Over the next 12 months, I'm going to be 1 in service games held. And I immediately went back to thinking, let's think about being 10. 10 is a great spot. But amazingly, the next week, we were playing in Toronto. And all he started thinking about was after a match, shoot, I lost my serve once. Not going to happen again. And so he actually, for the first time, really started thinking about, it's not going to be, I'm going to lose my serve 3 or 4 times. I'm going to break 3 or 4 times, and he started putting an emphasis on it. And believe it or not, just that little bit between us, over the next 12 months, he was first in holding serve at like 90%. And from that little bit, he went on to win Toronto that summer. He went on a month later to win the US Open. And so many times he would tell me, God, I lost my serve once today. It's not going to happen again. And he had never thought that way about his game. It was always about, the crazy thing about Andre was I could win any match and it was a good win. He'd win 6 and 4 and he thought it was the worst, or like it could always be better. But I was most proud about that he was now talking each time about not going to lose my serve again. Or he said, that's 20-something in a row that I've held. And it's like just having a goal sometimes at any level. It didn't become about wins and losses or what I need to do. It became about this little thing that he'd like to give me. See, didn't drop my serve. And then everything that he wanted to accomplish started to happen because of this easy goal. I just was hoping for 10. And it was amazing that his drive said that I wanted to be 1. And amazingly, 12 months from when we talked about that, he literally had the highest win percentage of holding serve in that 12 months.
Oh, wow.
Number 3.
96.
Mm-hmm.
Andre asked me when we started coaching, because I was playing and we had played 8 times. And he said, do you have any regrets? I said, it's a good question. Do I have any regrets? And I said, yeah, if I could change one result, it would be the 1988 Olympics. As a kid, the Olympics was such a big deal. So I ended up qualifying to play. And I think that was like, almost felt like I had won. And I remember getting to walk in the stadium with all of my fellow athletes. We had to wait out in this field. It was hot in Seoul, Korea for like 3 hours because, you was at the very end. But it was one of the great moments of my sporting life, getting to walk in the Olympics with my team. So going back to telling Andre this about regrets. So early on when I was coaching him, he was at my house. And, I don't have a lot of trophies out. And in my bar is the bronze medal. And he was asking me about that. I call it the big penny. I said, this is the highlight of my tennis career and the low light of my tennis career. And he was like, what? And I told him that it was the greatest moment of my sporting and tennis career. But it was the low light in that I got ahead of myself. That was something that I never did. I never thought, or I never, took any match for granted. And I said, if I could just change one result, anything, this would be a gold medal in the cabinet. And it wasn't about, he couldn't believe it wasn't about any major, it wasn't about any, it was just this one moment that if I could change. So fast forward to Andre in 96. I had only been coaching him for about a month. And he goes, I'm going to win the medal, the gold medal for you. I'm going to do it. So we get to Atlanta, and he's definitely not where he should be. But then all of a sudden, we had a little conversation at dinner about that night 2 years ago, about the one regret. And he goes, you know what? I'm turning everything around right now. And amazingly, he all of a sudden, the mindset and where his game had not been for 6 months magically turned around. Routes Bugera to win the gold, and Andre wore that gold for probably 2 days. And he had no idea his dad was in the stands because his dad didn't come or travel. And out of nowhere, when he won, his dad came from the top of the stands. We didn't even get him a ticket. And his dad had boxed in the 56 Olympics. And he got there to see Andre win that gold. And that was the most excited maybe I seen Andre about anything. And then I remember him telling me, that's for you, buddy.
Which one do you think is bigger, Davis Cup, Olympics, or the Maccabias?
Without question, the Olympics.
How come?
The Olympics is, Davis Cup is awesome. That's a great team event. But there's something for me that the Olympics, is a dream almost like. Davis Cup is every year. Olympics is every 4 years. You might get to play once.
Right.
Depending on the country that you come from, how many good play. So I feel like for me, it's somebody that grew up at, if I got a chance to do one thing, it would be that, to play the Olympics.
Number 4.
So 2003, June. It's just early, maybe it's middle of June. The French Open had just finished. I had stopped working with Andre after the Aussie Open of 2002. Was probably thinking about, what was the next thing that I was going to do coaching-wise. And, some people had called me, but nothing that I wanted to do yet. So I'd been home for a while. And that day, it was incredibly hot in San Rafael. And my wife had this idea about putting in this garden. Meantime, in the house, my daughter, who was 5 years old at the time, Zoe, picks up the phone, someone calls and says, is your dad there? And so, no, my dad's not here. Click, she hangs up. As it turns out, he calls back about 15 minutes later, and Zoe picks up again. He says, is your dad there? No, my dad's out. He's at working. And then he said, can I please leave a message? And Zoe is like, okay, it's Andy calling. And then she just hangs up. So he he patiently called back a third time and wanted to know if he could leave his number. And then Zoe at that point walks out to the garden and she says, Dad, this guy keeps calling and he wants to talk to you. He wants to leave his phone number. And so, and then she had forgotten his name. And I'm like, I was thinking her brother was there. Somebody's like, I was sweating. And Kim was like telling me, no, don't go inside because you got dirt all over. And it's like, okay, I'll go inside. And it's Andy Roddick on the phone, who I don't know that well. Wanted to know if any way that I would consider coaching him. And Queens starts in a few days. So, I was sitting there thinking about it. And I said, you know what? I think I can help you. I'll see you tomorrow. And he said, really? And I was like, yeah. So I go back. I put all the dirt back off my truck in the garden. I tell Kim, I'm going to go inside, take a quick shower, and go make a flight to London. I get to London the next day, and I don't really know, Andy that well. And we start to talk. And he starts to tell me that, like, I'm really excited you're here, but this is really going to be something, when we go to the States and play on hardcourt, because I play on grass. I can't beat anybody. I've never won a match on grass. I don't even know what I'm doing playing on grass. He goes, if I played a British wildcard, I'd probably lose. And I was like, I'm just thinking, man, I just flew over on a whim, and you're telling me you can't win a match. So I said, you know what? You got a huge serve. You got a huge forehand. You'll be fine on this surface. Just get rid of that stupid visor that you're wearing, maybe the gel in your hair, put on a proper hat, and you'll be fine. Amazingly, he won Queens, and he had never won a match, I think, on grass. He won Queens, ended up getting to the semis of Wimbledon, and then finished that year one in the world. And sometimes, it can be a phone call. It could be a conversation. Little things in coaching and tennis and life can be a lot of things. So, like with that phone call, it was his persistence that my daughter twice hung up on him. He picked back up the phone. And it kind of just took me back to that moment a little bit when I started with him, with my coach, thinking that things were going to be okay. And that's kind of how, whenever I coach, I never think about any other player. I never think about what's happened before. I only think about tomorrow, as my son will tell me, well, about today. But I never compare one player to another, and I never think about what's happened before. I only think about what's moving forward.
Number 5.
You were known for your trash talk and your ability to trash talk. I would like to know if you have any stories about when trash talking worked and maybe a story when it didn't work.
I'd like to think that, it's certainly not like NBA or football trash talking.
Very prevalent.
Where there was a lot of trash talking, more than I'd ever seen. When I came for the first time to Bollettieri's in '82, and I stayed with Jimmy Arias, he lived like at this, oh my God, this little dump complex. And it was 1,000,000 degrees, and I rocked up the first day, and man, there must have been 15 guys in the top 75 in the world there, and there was umpteen good juniors, and there was lots of trash talking going on at practice all over the place. And I'd like to think that it kind of was like a little bit inspiring in a way that everybody thinks that, they got it going on.
Yeah.
I think occasionally, maybe sitting down, I might have said to somebody, or crossing sides, I might have said to a specific player, you're not going to see a backhand today. You might as well be locked and loaded. It's coming to your crummy forehand every time. I remember once Lendl said to me, we were playing the Stuttgart final on clay, and it was early in the second set, and he was thumping me. And then on the changeover, he got pissed at me, and he goes, stop stalling. And I was like, you know what? I ain't letting you beat me in under an hour. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to slow things up. And he was like getting so mad. It was like, okay, I stretched the match to like an hour and 20 minutes, you know, that he was thumping me. And it's like, and he was like, it's like, he still thumped me, but it's like, at least I stretched it out. I mean, the rules in tennis, obviously today, don't allow you to do anything. But in our day, there would be a little more friendly banter, you know, and sometimes a little bit, you know, would be exchanged. Maybe one of the best things I ever got from an umpire. I was once losing at Wimbledon so bad. He'd probably get in so much trouble for it today. I was losing 6-1, 1-0 to Christian Bergstrom at Wimbledon. And I started stalling a little bit because I was just playing so bad. And then I went up to complain about a call that I had no business complaining about. It was inside the line, and I was like, it's out. And I go up to the umpire, and I go to complain. And the umpire's name, he was a great French umpire. His name was Bruno Ribot. And he said to me, before even about the call, I can't believe you're playing so bad today. Why are you playing so bad? And I went and looked at it, and I went like this. I started thinking, it's like, you're right. I just absolutely suck today, and I don't know why. I went back on the next point. I forgot why I was stalling. I forgot why I was arguing or whatever. And somehow I just started to relax because I laughed a little bit. And I turned that match around in 4 sets from the umpire telling me why I was so bad today. But I'd like to think that it was a little more friendly banter. I didn't talk that much smack, but like my buddy Jimmy Arias liked to talk a lot of smack at volunteers. But I think that's where it came from, because I didn't kind of grow up learning about it. But that was definitely very prevalent in the early days of volunteers.